In the opening months of 2014, law enforcement officers in a quiet Oregon community launched a search on a remote property buried deep inside a stretch of forest. The land covered roughly 20 acres and sat far from neighboring homes, accessible only by a narrow dirt road. A man from the area had recently vanished, and investigators believed this property was one of the last places he had stayed. As deputies spread out to comb the land, one officer walked along the outer edge of a barn. That's when he noticed something on the ground that didn't belong. At first glance, it was unrecognizable, but with each step closer, the reality set in. What deputies uncovered that day would soon dominate national news and expose a disturbing truth hiding in plain sight within this seemingly peaceful town.
Skull and an arm, and I'm not sure.
To understand how this place became the center of such a horrific discovery, you have to go back decades, back to the woman who owned the land. For much of her life, Susan Monica appeared to be doing well. She had a stable career as an engineer, a tight circle of friends, and lived in San Francisco, a city filled with opportunity and energy. But Susan never felt at home there. Living in the city wasn't something she pursued out of passion, it was simply where life placed her. Inside, she longed for something completely different. Susan craved solitude, silence, distance from people. The kind of peace that cities rarely offer. After long workdays, she would sit alone in her apartment, imagining a future far removed from urban life. A place where she could live independently, grow her own food, and rely on no one but herself. In 1991, at 43 years old, Susan decided to make that vision real. She purchased a large piece of land, 20 acres of dense forest, near a small town in Oregon called Winner. What she bought wasn't a farm in any traditional sense. There were no buildings, no utilities, no running water or electricity, just raw, undeveloped land. To most people, it would have seemed impractical. To Susan, it was exactly what she wanted. The isolation appealed to her. The challenge of starting from nothing excited her. As an engineer, she had the skills to design and construct buildings safely, and she was physically strong and unafraid of hard labor. When she first arrived at the property, driving slowly up the winding forest road and stepping onto the land, she felt an immediate sense of belonging. Even without structures, it already felt like home. Over the following months, Susan built the farm herself. A barn, a small shack to live in, pens for animals. What was once wilderness slowly became a working homestead. But once everything was built, Susan realized something she hadn't anticipated. Construction wasn't the hard part. Keeping the farm running was. The daily demands never stopped. Feeding animals, fixing structures, managing projects. Doing it all alone became exhausting. Eventually, Susan accepted that if she wanted the farm to survive, she needed help. She began posting help wanted signs around Wimmer. The people who responded were often those on the margins, travelers, drifters, people with criminal histories who struggled to find steady work. Susan didn't concern herself with their pasts. Her expectations were simple: work hard and don't disrupt the peace. Over the next 2 decades, countless people passed through Susan's farm. Some stayed days, some stayed months. Eventually, they all moved on. And once they left, Susan never heard from them again. That pattern held until the beginning of 2014. On January 1st, Susan, now 66 years old, was outside her shack when she noticed a car approaching her property. This alone caught her attention. Visitors were rare. Almost no one came out that way unannounced. The vehicle pulled into her driveway. 3 young adults stepped out, 2 men and a woman. Before Susan could ask anything, they explained why they were there. They were searching for their father. His name was Robert Haney. Robert had told them he was working on Susan's farm in exchange for cash and living in a camper on her land. He was a traveling handyman who moved from place to place. Despite that lifestyle, he regularly checked in with his children. But this time, too much time had passed. Robert didn't own a phone. He had no permanent address. They had no way to track him down. Susan immediately recognized his name. She told them she had hired Robert the previous spring. In the beginning, he was reliable, quiet, hard-working, kept to himself. He even had a dog that stayed with him and was friendly around the farm. But by August, Robert's behavior shifted. He began drinking heavily. He stopped working consistently. He spent much of his time ranting outside his camper, talking about revenge. Susan later learned the reason behind his anger. One of Robert's children had been assaulted, and he was consumed by guilt for not being there to protect them. Alcohol became his coping mechanism. While Susan sympathized with his pain, his behavior disrupted the calm environment she had built her life around. She planned to confront him, possibly fire him, if things didn't change. Before she could, Robert approached her himself. One day, he handed Susan an envelope filled with cash and asked her to take care of his dog for a while. She agreed. Shortly after, Susan watched Robert climb into a white car, driven by someone she didn't recognize. The vehicle turned around and disappeared down the dirt road. That was in September. She never saw him again. Susan showed the children Robert's camper. Inside, his belongings were untouched. But one item stood out immediately: his tool belt. As a handyman, leaving it behind made no sense. The children thanked Susan and drove to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office to report their father missing. Investigators quickly realized how difficult the case would be. Robert lived off the grid. No phone, no address. But his recent behavior, heavy drinking, and talk of revenge raised serious concerns. Then came a break. Robert's EBT card records showed it had been used a month earlier at a Walmart, about 30 minutes southwest of Susan's farm. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage. Robert never appeared. Susan did. She was seen using his card. A search warrant was obtained. On January 10th, deputies arrived at Susan's property. She greeted them calmly. Inside her kitchen, the sheriff confronted her. Susan explained Robert had given her the card and the pin to buy dog food. She said the cash she left had run out. The explanation seemed plausible. Then a deputy rushed in and whispered something to the sheriff. His expression changed instantly. Susan was taken into custody. At the station, the sheriff asked her one question: "Has anyone died on your property?" Susan paused. Then she told them what she said. She had left out. She claimed Robert had returned. One morning, while feeding her animals, she noticed her pigs gathered unnaturally around one spot in the pen. When she entered, she realized they weren't just surrounding something. They were eating it. At the center was Robert. His body had been torn open. His organs were gone, and he was still alive. Susan said she tried to pull the pigs away, but they kept attacking. Believing he couldn't survive, she retrieved a shotgun and shot him, claiming it was an act of mercy. Days later, she collected what remained, but deputies had already found Robert's leg, lying exposed on the property. Then Susan revealed another death. Stephen Delacino, a former worker from 2012. She claimed an argument led to a gun discharging, Stephen falling into the pig pen, and the pigs attacking him. Despite her explanations, the jury didn't believe her. On April 21, 2015, Susan Monica was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. She received a minimum sentence of 50 years in prison. While incarcerated, Susan claimed there were 17 more bodies buried on her land. None were ever found.
I would like the people of Rogue River to donate a small amount of money so that I can have my pigs butchered and the meat given to the Rogue River Community Center.
Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you.
We'll see you later this afternoon.